All right, we're gonna get started here if we could. I'd like to start by first thanking everybody for coming. I hope everybody had a great summer. Probably not long enough, right? We're getting ready for the school season to begin again, which is crazy that we're here already, but we've been off for a little while during the summer, but I thank everybody for coming, and I hope you all had enjoyed your summer. So I'm going to call the New Hartford Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting, 7 p.m. Tuesday, August 18th, to order at 7 o'clock exactly. If you are able, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have a full agenda tonight, so we're going to try to move through this as quickly as possible. Next item on the agenda is the order of business. I do not have any changes to the order of business. Anyone on the board have any changes? Seeing none, no changes to the order of business. We're going to move on to item C on the agenda, which is communication to the Board of Education. We did receive an email from, oh boy, this is Lacey Gover, Lacey Gover, regarding gratitude to the amazing school district. Again, I won't read this, but this will be part of the meeting minutes. That's the only other piece of, only piece of Board of Education communication, correct?
We have a couple other things.
Okay. You have a couple more?
Tim, I had forwarded the Board of Ed a communication that the task force received from a resident regarding some recommendations for looking at grade leveling within the district. I forwarded that probably like 2-ish weeks ago. So I would have expected that to have been included in tonight's minutes.
Do you recall it?
No, we'll make sure that it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning it. We will note it. Both Sarah and Elizabeth are both here, and we will make sure that those documents that you forwarded to Tim will be part of this board meeting packet, and they will be posted on the website tomorrow. Yeah, of course. Sorry about that.
Yeah, my apologies. It's a long summer.
Excuse me, I have a public comment.
Yeah, that's the next thing on the agenda, sir. Yep. So that's all we have for communications to the Board of Education. Oh, you have something else?
Yep, I've got, in your packets, you'll see that the New Hartford Board of Education 2026 Educator Evaluation Plan checklist has been submitted, and we are going to continue our most updated and approved evaluation tool for our staff here in New Hartford Public Schools. So that is part of our packet as well. Additional communication. As we continue our advocacy efforts, you'll see a letter to Senator Murphy regarding all of our federal grants to continue to support that for the essential operations and support of all of our students here in New Hartford Public Schools. Also part of the packet and available online is our quarterly update. I encourage everyone to read that. It's our Bright Futures Bulletin, quick two-sided with some hyperlinks that are located within the for areas of interest of some of the upcoming, events that have taken place and Board of Education policy updates. Those are all of my pieces.
Okay. Next item is public comment. Would anybody like to address the board?
Good evening. My name is Ole Carlson. I live at 455 West Hill Road, and I've got two things that I would like to share with you tonight. First is, 2 years ago, the board started a reading program based on the science of reading. The aim was to improve the performance of children in the New Hartford school system, and this was a possible goal. A principal in New Hartford, unhappy with his school's performance, had started such a program. After a few months not seeing the gains, he moved to a science-based approach. Within the school year, test results showed marked improvement. Nearly 60% of third graders were proficient in decoding words, up from 30% at the beginning of the school year. In other words, he did this in less than 9 months. The school has over 600 students and is in a low-income area. Mississippi has a school program based on science and now ranks 9th in the country in reading. Actually, corrected for poverty, they rank #1. Alabama ranks #1 in math recovery, and Louisiana ranks first in reading recovery after the pandemic losses. How do these states accomplish this? Money. They spend about half of what New Hartford spends, so it's not money. Over the last 10 years, the average ELA score in New Hartford is 61.64, and the average math score is 52.82. If these numbers were grades, and it's fair to think of them as grades, then the school system you're responsible for would receive a letter grade of F. But more importantly, these scores mean that 40% of the students are not achieving grade level in ELA, and 50% are not achieving grade level in math. Now, this is with 31 certified teaching staff, 32 non-certified teaching staff, and now if you assume a class size of 20, you have a certified staff that could teach 620 students. If you include the non-certified, you're over 1,200. If you look back over the last 10 years, you'll find the number of students meeting grade level year after year is consistent with this year's numbers. Now, what do these numbers suggest? Well, it suggests you do not have a teaching staff capable of teaching 40% of the students in ELA and 50% of the students in math. So the question becomes, why doesn't the school show any improvement over a 10-year period? After all, over the 10-year period, the number of students has gone down, the number of teachers and staff have gone up, the budget's gone up, and with all that, the performance has stayed the same. I read in the minutes of the June 2 board meetings, that Mr. Lynch bragged that 2 students were graduated out of special ed. I don't know why he thought that was important. I thought teaching was what you were supposed to do. That's what you are getting paid to do. And perhaps now he can turn his attention to the 50% that failed grade level in math and 40% that failed grade level in English. So getting back to the reading question, how do these states accomplish student improvement? Money. They spend half of what New Hartford spends, so it's not money. There is one thing these schools must have and our school lacks, and that's effective leadership. It requires leadership to change direction. It requires leadership to insist on performance. It requires leadership to hold teachers accountable. That direction starts with the board, and then to the superintendent, and moves down to the principals and then to the teachers. If the superintendent can't lead, nothing will change. The second is a little more serious. I'm writing to formally address a serious breach of statutory duty by the superintendent and the chair of the Board of Education. Recently, 4 valid information FOIA requests were arbitrarily and illegally denied by the superintendent's office, and a decision subsequently endorsed by the board chair. These requests sought basic categories of public records, and these were just numbers. The number of pre-K students legally requiring educational support, the number of out-of-district children attending the New Hartford district, the number of registered students for the 26-27 school year, and salary information for district personnel. All of the above figures are standard data points reported to the state each year. The refusal to provide identified aggregate democratic data which is routinely sent to the state, demonstrates a severe misapplication of educational privacy laws. Prior to submitting these requests, I consulted with an individual knowledgeable in FOI procedures to ensure the exact and correct forms were utilized. Following each subsequent denial by the district, I shared the denial letters with the same expert for review. I was advised my requests were legally valid and the district's denials lack any legal standing. Beyond the immediate statutory violation, the willful endorsement of this denial by district leadership raises significant questions regarding governance, liability, and the current standing of both the superintendent and the chair board. Implications for the superintendent's status under Connecticut General Statute 10-157. The superintendent is an employee of the Board of Education, tasked with acting as the executive agent of the board and ensuring district complies with state and federal laws. Withholding definitive public records is the dereliction of administrative duty. By flagrantly violating Connecticut FOIA, the superintendent is unnecessarily exposing the district to legal liability, FOIC appeals, and the expenditure of taxpayer-funded legal fees to defend an indefensible position. The board, acting in its fiduciary and oversight capacity, must evaluate this action as a matter of performance. Deliberate non-compliance with state transparency laws constitutes grounds for formal disciplinary reviews, and it undermines public trust and breaches the executive obligation to execute district business lawfully. Implications for the chair status. The board's chair endorsement of an illegal withholding of public information is a profound governance failure. While the chair is an elected official, they do not present unilateral authority to override state statutes or shield the districts from its legal transparency obligations. Under Connecticut General Statute 1-206B, (2), the Freedom of Information Commission possesses the statutory authority to impose civil penalties against a public official who denies access to public records without reasonable grounds. By explicitly agreeing to withhold legally mandated information, the state has placed both the district and themselves at the risk of FOIC sanctions. Furthermore, while a chair cannot be removed from the board as an elected member without specific statutory or charter processes, the Board of Education maintains absolute authority to organize its own leadership. A chair who actively facilitates the violation of state laws has compromised their ability to lead. The board should critically assess whether this conduct warrants a vote of no confidence or a reorganization of the board to restore legal compliance and statutory integrity. The board must be fully aware the Connecticut Freedom of Information Commission handles appeals and enforces compliance with strict penalties that impact both the individuals involved and the taxpayers. Direct fines for public officials under Connecticut Statute 1-206(b)(2), the FOIC has the authority to level civil penalties up to $1,000 against a record custodian or public official. These fines are justified if the commission determines that a record denial was made without reasonable grounds, or an agency engages in a practice or pattern of conduct that obstructs public assets. Payment of fines and taxpayer burden. While the statutory language gives the FOIC the authority to personally fine the individual officers responsible for the FOI failure, in order to deter future violations in practice, the municipality or state agency often ends up paying the fees using public funds. This means the illegal actions of the superintendent and the chair directly risk squandering taxpayer money to cover their own non-compliance. The full board can't remain passive while its executive agent, that be the superintendent, and presiding officer conclude to violate state transparency laws. I expect the requested records to be provided to me without further delay. Additionally, I request this communication be entered into the public official correspondence for the open session for the next scheduled Board of Education meeting. I expect the full board to review this matter in open session to determine the appropriate corrective actions regarding district leadership adherence to state law. I have filed formal complaints with the FOIC in Hartford and will request that civil penalties be assessed against the responsible officials. Should the requested information be provided promptly, I will inform the commission accordingly.
Anybody else like to address the board?
Pardon me?
I said, thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Oh, I'd like to give you copies of
Oh, sure. Sure. Would anybody else like to address the board?
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item D, Superintendent's Report. Mr. Sousa.
Thank you so much, everybody. And welcome to the 26-27 school year. It's a very exciting time of year, brand new. Everyone feels like they are hopefully rested and ready to go. I have tremendous hope for this year and for the future of New Hartford Public Schools. The district will succeed because of the 9 members that are here as elected officials, as Board of Education members. The district will succeed because of its administration and its very dedicated and talented staff. I have made the very difficult decision to resign my position this evening. I've contemplated and prayed about this decision, and it's ultimately the best for my family. I've accepted a position at Advance where I will support 31 districts in the Northwest region, inclusive of New Hartford. I am deeply humbled for the opportunity to serve New Hartford for the past 4 years, and I look forward to watching the district completely flourish and continue the great work that is already accomplished. On to other news. Staff news, we have to welcome some babies. Colleen Savo, we are congratulating Colleen on the welcoming of Preston, Ross Fenner for baby Harrison, and Haley Duttlinger for baby Walker. And as we open up the beginning of schools, we need to thank all of those that are due. Our custodians, Jamie, Ross, Frank, Mark, Andy, Ben, and Flynn. The floors are not simply gleaming if you haven't seen them here. They're sparkling, they're amazing. Every area of the building has been deeply cleaned by our dedicated team. For that, we are very thankful. Our nurses, we thank you for ensuring everyone is ready to safely return to school. There's a tremendous amount of responsibilities on our nurses to make sure that that happens safely for everybody. Our administrative assistants, thank you for ensuring everything's ready to go. Files are ready, resources and materials are checked in and distributed. Parents' questions have been answered and fears have been allayed. Thank you so much. To our teachers and paraeducators, I've seen you spend your time here in the summer, your time off in classrooms preparing to welcome in your new family of students who are eager to be part of your life for the next season of their own life. What a tremendous gift. Cafeteria staff, thank you for ensuring that our students will have nutritious meals served from local farms and for being friendly faces every day to our kids. DATCO manager Michelle Tashan and the bus drivers, thank you for coordinating the myriad of student transportation needs and for transporting our most precious cargo to and from school each and every day. To my central office staff, thank you for dedicating the summer to ensure we are operationally ready to be successful. You do so much work behind the scenes. To our special education department, thank you, Mike and Kellyanne, for making sure that all of our students' special needs are provided with excellence and with strong, powerful relationships with our families. They entrust us with them. To Heather Mathis, our curriculum coach, thank you for your unshakable support, strategic thinking, and knowing what New Hartford students need to be successful. To our IT department, Paul Carmen and Christine Kerr, thank you for the updated Wi-Fi and successfully transition to update student data management has been no undertaking of any sorts that I would envy at all. To my principals, Amy and Kelly, our invincible and incredible school leaders, thank you for always having students at the center of every decision unapologetically. I have always been impressed with your dedication. Everyone breathes New Hartford and everyone is ready to have an amazing return to school with our learners this year. So thank you to everybody. A special shout out to our extended school year staff. They are dedicated to our most sensitive students that need a lot of support. Kaylee Midwinter, Marcella Seton-Cologne, and Lori Fenner. You make learning fun, engaging, and have students be the owners of their own learning. Continuing on our personnel report, we want to welcome aboard Jessica Guerrera, our new special education teacher at Anatolini. Jessica Guerrera is our new special ed teacher with 15 years of experience including kindergarten experience, second grade teacher, special education teacher, instructional coach, and assistant principal. She is eager to contribute and serve the community of New Hartford. Stephanie Comp is our district-wide part-time physical therapist. Stephanie previously worked with our district for several years prior to her maternity leave last year. Stephanie will be returning as part-time physical therapist, providing direct services to our students. Lauren Bunch, we want to welcome on as our long-term substitute teacher in kindergarten at New Hartford Elementary. She's a recent college graduate, and she's thrilled to begin her teaching journey with us. She's looking forward to creating a classroom where everyone feels welcomed, loved, and is excited to learn. Liza DiMartino, no stranger to New Hartford Public Schools. We are so happy to have her welcome and have her return home here as our nurse at New Hartford Elementary School. Amy Karpovich joining us as our full-time occupational therapist, no stranger to our district as well. Patricia Brett, we welcome as a para-educator. She previously was a substitute teacher, turned full-time para-educator in our classrooms now. The next portion of our meeting, I would be requesting a motion and consideration from the Board of Education for one of our positions that is required by Connecticut school law or Connecticut law. I'm going to be requesting a $5,000 increase followed by a 3% raise for each year for our registered nurse that we have within our public schools. They are in charge of the following and more, which I probably cannot encapsulate and capture here. Assess and respond to student illness, injuries, and medical emergencies. Provide first aid and nursing care during the school day. Administer medications in accordance with physician's orders, parental authorization, and state law. Monitor students with chronic medical conditions such as diabetes, asthma, seizures, allergies, and other health needs. Develop and implement individualized healthcare plans when appropriate. Maintain emergency action plans for students with significant medical needs. Coordinate care for students returning to school after illness, hospitalization, and injury. Conduct required vision, hearing, scoliosis, growth, and other health screenings. Make appropriate referrals based on those screening results. Promote health, wellness, hygiene, nutrition, and disease prevention on a daily basis and also through our policy here in the Board of Education level. Monitor communicable diseases and follow appropriate exclusion and reporting procedures. Maintain immunization and physical examination records. Participate as a member of multidisciplinary teams, including PPT and IEP meetings when health needs affect educational access. Provide health information relevant to educational planning while maintaining confidentiality. Collaborate with special education staff, related service providers, families, and outside healthcare providers and professionals. Assist in determining appropriate accommodations for students with medical needs. Maintain emergency medical supplies and equipment. Develop and periodically review school emergency medical procedures. Train appropriate staff in student-specific emergency procedures, medication administration, and other health-related needs. Respond to emergencies and coordinate with EMS when necessary. Maintain accurate and confidential student health records. Document nursing assessments, treatments, medications, injuries, and parent-guardian communications. Ensure compliance with the Connecticut Department of Education and Department of Public Health requirements and district policies. Prepare required health reports and documentation. Communicate with parents, guardians regarding student health concerns. Coordinate with physicians, specialists, hospitals, and other healthcare providers as authorized. Advocate for students' health and ability to access their education. Provide consultation to teachers, administration, counselors, and other school personnel regarding student health needs. And collaborate with our district's medical advisor. And I am sure, I'm actually positive, I'm not covering everything that our registered nurse is responsible for here in New Hartford Public Schools. For comparison's sake, I want to share with the board, looking at districts around us. Canton currently pays their registered nurse $75,000 in salary. Heartland, $73,000. Nonawag, $73,000. Right next door in Region 7, $70,500. State average across the board is about $66,000. Region 13, $66,000. Torrington, $63,650. Region 10, $63,500. New Hartford, $60,000. So that is why I'm requesting that the Board of Education allow me to engage in contractual negotiations with our current registered nurse. She provides a tremendous amount of services, and we want to compensate her at least at the state average, which we are not currently. We are at the bottom of the barrel. I've paused there for a motion.
$3,000 this current year and increase 3% over the next, with the contract term?
3-year contract, 3 years, 3%, 3%.
Yes,
We have a second by
John.
John.
Was this a request by the individual, or this was brought to your attention in another means, or this is something you observed? How did this come to the table today?
Combination of all of the above. So when looking at budgets from other districts, it was very clear. And in this position where we were hiring nurses, this information was very relevant and came to my attention. Prior to that, it came to my attention a couple of years ago when we were looking for a nurse, not a registered nurse for our district. And I had posted the position online only to be severely scrutinized by the amount of pay that we are offering for such a very valuable and important person to take care of our students in the district. So a litany of different sources.
Where would you pull this money from in the immediate budget? That would be coming out of the budget that just passed back in May, correct?
That would be correct. So I would be looking at different areas within the budget. I don't have a specific area right now that I would pick and select from. I know that we have been awarded a seed grant. I know that we've been awarded other grants. So if we could transfer money from one account that we're gonna have covered already through a grant, that would be the easiest way to do it.
What's the student to nurse ratio compared to some of these other?
I don't know. I didn't write down all the student numbers, but I know for Region 7, very comparable with us, and they're at $70,000. And they have 2 registered nurses at Region 7. So that I could speak to because that's very relevant and close by in my conversations with Mr. LePage.
Is that $60,000 salary the top step for nurses, or do they not have step increases?
They don't have step increases.
Just a
Great
flat-
question.
okay.
Just a flat rate.
We're just talking about a person? Or are we
One
talking
individual
about-
position.
Okay.
Correct.
We weren't talking about.
Not
the
all 3.
nurses.
No, one
Okay.
individual position at this time.
So they would get an additional $5,000 now in their salary for this year that we're in, fiscal
Correct.
year. And then next fiscal year in 27, they would get a 3%.
3%.
And then
another
3%.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Can you remind me where the RN works out of?
Currently, it would be out of Bakerville Elementary School, but that position can be at any of our schools based on administration appointing the individual to an area of increased need.
So does she travel, or he? She
That
travels
individual could
between buildings currently?
Absolutely necessary. Was traveling already last year for a severely medically fragile student.
What are the other options?
For
Should we not do this? What are the other options that are on the table? Or are there any other options?
I don't have any other options. I'm trying to advocate and recommend to the board for a value of an individual that takes care of everything that I just read out loud, that ensures the safety and well-being of our entire district as the lead person, the lead medical professional, and again, in consultation with our medical advisor, that is commensurate with a state average of $66,000. I'm asking for $5,000, so we're still actually $1,000 short. If you're looking at just getting at the state average level. I don't want to risk losing a highly qualified individual. Registered nurses are not easy to come by. They will clearly make more money at a hospital setting or another clinical setting in a school setting. That is not the case. When you've attained a highly qualified individual, I would recommend that we maintain them and take good care of them.
I think, Tim, another option could be to incorporate some type of steps into the salary. So kind of some type of longevity to, once they get a top step, that they might not want to leave here. And if they do, then we're hiring at a lower step again. So it's not costing us as much.
Any other questions or comments?
The only thing, that's probably common in policing to have steps. I don't think it is in nursing. I think they make what they make. And
Or to require negotiation of the contract, right?
Yeah, and typically when we are looking at steps, we are looking at a unionized group. We don't have a unionized nurses group here in New Hartford Public Schools. So that would be another hurdle that we would have to cross, for sure.
Any other thoughts, questions? We have a motion by Penny to increase our current RN salary by $5,000 in the next current year and 3% thereafter for the next 3 years. It was seconded by John Puz.
I thought it was the next 2 years for 3%.
3 and 3.
What's that?
So 5,000 now.
Yeah.
3%, 3%.
Okay, for the next 2 years, you're right.
Yep.
Right. 3% for the next 2 years. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you tremendously. That means the world to me, and I know that will make tremendous difference to our extremely qualified individual who cares deeply about the well-being of all of our children and our students here, and our staff as well. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate that, Board of Ed, all of you. Continuing on into the next item, letter B, Regional 7 Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. Tim and I will probably tag team this. Want to just update the public. This has been a long discussed topic of conversation predating myself and some members here on the Board of Education. When we look at all of the feeding districts that send students to Region 7, they all come with different experiences, different opportunities within every town, New Hartford inclusive. So Region 7 has brought together the superintendents and the board chairs of all of our districts to discuss the idea of looking into such position. We're in the preliminary discussion stages of it. This would not have impact on this current year's budget. This would be for the 27-28 school year budget for consideration. More information about that position is going to be revealed and shared. However, overall, the quick summary of it is it would be an individual that would ensure that experiences of students from New Hartford, from Colebrook, from Norfolk, and Barkhamsted that are sending students to Region 7 are aligned. That's what they're looking to do, to improve their practices, to understand what instruction is being done at the elementary school levels before they go up to the middle school levels at Region 7. So that is an idea that has been talked about in the past. It looks like it's gaining more traction due to the strategic planning that Region 7 just undertook recently. And there'll be more information about that, but I just want to start communicating that out to the public. That is something that Region 7 and the feeding districts are taking a look at. Anything else to add?
The only thing is, yep, it's on. Yeah, this is one of the shared services that we've been talking about as a region. Something that was brought to us from the Region 7 Board of Education. So we met out there and talked about the position, whether or not the position would be a Region 7 employee or it would be an Ed Advance employee is one of the topics we're looking at now. But this is something, again, to align the curriculums for all the feeder schools and also to start there at Region 7. So Region 7 has a curriculum basis that we work with all the feeding schools. So should be there'll be more to come, as Jeff said, but it's a step in the right direction, right, to make sure that we're aligned on curriculum.
All right, up next is letter D, our Clean Air School Challenge grant acceptance. So I will be requesting from the board to make a motion to accept a $9,000 grant that we applied for. Obviously, during the budget season, you can't predict these things. It was awarded after the fact. But the American Lung Association Clean Air School Challenge for $9,000 to be utilized over the course of this year. It requires the submission of a district-wide clean air management program, which we are working on. The following positions would be, and it's included in your packet, and utilization of those $9,000. It's going to help us offset the cost of our contractor now that does our air filtration and HVAC work at a tune of about $6,000. We're looking to also replace our nurse filters from our budget using this grant money at a cost of about $150. We are stipending staff that are going to be sharing their professional expertise, being part of the stakeholder group in accordance with the grant requirements. So we have 3 stipends at $1,200. We have administrative support, putting together our meetings, our agendas, our minutes, all of the documentation, all of the support that we're getting from UConn Health as well and UConn School. And then refreshments at $75 and our coordinator for the entire district at $750. So that is the breakdown that is in your packet currently. My request is that the Board of Education accept the $9,000 grant to make it formal.
I'll make the motion to accept the grant.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Tim, second by Penny to accept the $9,000 grant for the Clean Air School Challenge. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That is unanimous.
Okay, thank you so much, Board. And again, very proud of the work that we do with our grants. Speaking of grants, our ARPA grant, in your packet, you'll see that I just distributed to you guys when you walked in. This will be available on our website, of course. And it has also been shared currently with our Board of Selectmen and our Board of Finance. So our Selectman, Dan Jerem, in one of our tri-board meetings, shared that we have ARPA school funds to expend by the end of this calendar year, December 2026. So the chairman and I started to compile a list of deferred maintenance that has been taking place over a course of time, most specifically a lot of electrical work, as you could see here, right here at Ann Antolini School. Majority of the focus is at Ann Antolini School because of current conversations with School Utilization Task Force, the newness of our building here, and maintaining and keeping up with the maintenance here at this particular school at Ann Antolini School. So you'll see about $30,000 to do all of that electrical work. That information came from the Silver Petroselli and Associates evaluation of the site. So we're using that right in conjunction with that, as well as the water heaters here at Ann Antolini, which are either leaking, failing, or about to. There was also an expansion joint or expansion joints that have been were inspected, removed, and recaulked. And I thank the chairman for his expertise on that to help me and my team navigate, and Jamie Hirschgold to look at contractors and have them come in and do that work for us. Galazzo Paving took we utilized some of the ARPA funds at approximately $23,000 to take care of the back driveway, which the Wolverines in the town utilize for practice fields. That walkway was deteriorating. Every time it rained, there would be a tremendous amount of silt or small rocks, and students are traveling up and down that several times a day for recess. It was not safe for their little ankles, and our nurses wouldn't like that, neither would their parents. So we want to keep our kiddos safe. That has been paved, and I have to give a very special shout out to our selectman, Dan Jerem, for working together with the Board of Education to help backfill, because as Galazzo paved it, we need to make sure that we backfilled all the edges so that it's not going to erode. And Dave Helt and his very talented team came and compacted the area down, put in riprap so that it prevents the erosion. And we are awaiting a curb also so that that area is protected and will not allow all of that washout every time we have rains, especially the heavy rains that brought on all of that. So that's our paving project. There was also a small patch at Bakerville that was completely crumbling and falling apart right before students were going out to recess. It was not going to survive the winter with any plowing whatsoever. There were large chunks of asphalt and, again, tripping hazard. There's plenty to be done at Bakerville, but that one particular area really needed to be replaced, about a 20 by 20 foot area. And again, thank you to the town for working together with the Board of Education. That made me so proud to see our guys working out there, preparing the area and taking good care of our schools. That makes me extremely, extremely proud. So thank you for that. One of our Antolini classrooms needed to have tile that was underneath the carpet right across the hall, as we're looking to prepare that for future usage, and that needed to be sent away. I don't have a price on that yet. That's why it says TBD. There was remediation of very small amount of trace mold at Ann Antolini and New Hartford Elementary School. That has been taken care of and remediated. The reports are online. We're passed, we're clear. Very small trace amounts, probably from humidity more than anything else. And then New Hartford Elementary School, there's roof repair. I know that's been the topic of conversation for some folks wondering what's going on. So currently a patch job, very small patch job at a cost of $5,500 by one of the companies that we've contracted will be doing that work. And hopefully it holds up, because we know that we've had some issues with past snowstorms or rainstorms as well, causing leaks and damaging materials in there. So the total spent to date as of August 15th looks to be about $80,000 with a balance remaining. You'll notice an asterisk there of $19,793.93 because it's an approximation. When we had met as a tri-board, it was $100,000, but I've been paying close attention to the Board of Selectmen meeting and Board of Finance meetings. It sounds like there might be a little bit more than that. We'll work with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to determine exact numbers so that we can continue to work down our list of deferred maintenance and make sure our buildings are safe and sound. So that is an update for the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA grant for the schools. And again, thank you to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance and Board of Education for supporting that work, and Silver Petroselli for providing us that evaluation to get some of these very important things done for our schools. Questions?
Keep going.
Keep going. Yes, sir. All right. Up next is the free breakfast and reduced lunch from Ed Advance. There is a flyer that will be distributed. It should be part of your packet here. I implore parents to read it very carefully because they were waiting on legislation from the state. And so the main takeaway is breakfast meals are free for all students this year. And lunch meals for students who qualify for reduced meals are also free. So there will be no cost whatsoever. And that is in large part thanks to our legislation and the groups that are working within the education committee at the state level to provide that. So there's a flyer that was sent out. Please, again, parents, I implore you to pay special attention to that. If there's any questions, of course, please reach out to Becky Terrell. She's our sponsor at Advance and can answer any questions that you may have. So that is our free breakfast and reduced lunch. Our excess cost grant, which is often the bone of contention. We spend a tremendous amount of money for outplacement of students. We get a small fraction back based on our per pupil expense. I wanted to report that we have seen an increase in that actual figure of $323. You will see that in your expenditure report when we get to that point in time. I will make sure that I point that out again. Last year, if you don't recall, we had received a much larger chunk of money because of all the noise that the public was making for the legislation to take care of and put an additional $50 million into that emergency fund. We received $17,000 in excess last year for excess cost grant, which was great news. Lastly, this is hot off the press in alignment with all of our grants. New Hartford Public Schools, in collaboration with Canton Public Schools, has applied for a competitive grant, a very, very competitive grant, very large set aside of money as well that was in the legislation recently. And I'm pleased to announce that New Hartford Public Schools continues to be recognized and was awarded $500,000 to establish a high-quality special education program in district. More details will be presented at a later period in time, and I want to request that the Board of Education, everybody else, we could absolutely celebrate it now. We'll make formal motions later. Director Mike Lynch deserves all of the credit. He's sitting in our audience, along with his collaborator, Barbara McLean in Canton. They were the ones that designed the grant, thought very carefully about all of the elements of what we would need to bring students back to district at a much, much, much cost-effective manner versus spending the average $180,000. It will also provide Canton students service and support and other neighboring districts as a source of revenue. So much more work to be done, but I could not be prouder because New Hartford Public Schools, 1 out of 41 that was awarded, and one of the 2 highest. Brookfield and Bethany were awarded $500,000, and so was New Hartford and Canton. Everybody else was awarded $350,000 or less. That is something to be extremely proud of, to take care of our children here in New Hartford, and I'm so, so happy to announce that. The press release is part of the board members packet and will also be online for those that are interested in other districts or the announcement itself. Again, I could not be prouder of the work of our special education department. Thank you so much, Mike Lynch. Good work, sir. All right. I think that's everything that I have as we are back. Yeah, I'll turn it over to you. I'm good.
I'm going to open it up for any questions that you might have for the superintendent's report.
Just the New Hartford Canton, how does that work?
More details to be shared. So they work together collaboratively to write the grant, to submit the grant. They met with the State Department in review of the grant as well. In terms of logistics, payroll, what shared staff, they're going to work on all those logistics because Canton may already have X position and this would help augment that, but that individual may come and service us, vice versa, or we may have the program designed here specifically so that person would come over here and help us on a part-time basis. All of those fine logistics are going to still be worked out with different positions that are going to be required, obviously, to support students in district. So a lot more to come, but I'm just excited about the initial news and the awarding of it.
Based off of what you just said, does it sound like most of the capital improvements that are earmarked in here are meant for New Hartford?
It would be approximately $100,000 to $150,000 for capital improvements for the classrooms. And then the remainder would be for personnel, I believe, at this time. That's how I believe it was detailed.
But in New Hartford?
But in New Hartford, correct.
Sorry,
Yeah,
just want to.
yeah, absolutely.
I do not have a question. We kind of scooted by it pretty quickly. I want to congratulate you on your new position.
Thank you
You're
so
gonna do
much.
Great. And just thank you for all the long hours and extended amounts of time that you've put in for us and for our students in this community. And now we will miss you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's been an absolute honor, but I can't take the credit. We have an exceptional team here. Exceptional teachers, administration, staff. Everybody knows the mission, rowing in the same direction. It's all about kids forever. That's what it's all about. We don't know the answer. We're going to figure it out together. Everyone understands that. It's a beautiful place.
Any other questions or comments regarding the superintendent's report? Right. I mean, I would also like to, again, this report coming back from a summer vacation is fantastic, right? I think every piece of this is positive news for the district of New Hartford. Getting a $500,000 grant, Mr. Lynch, that's fantastic, right? Great work. Jeff, moving on, it's going to be bittersweet, right? But we'll be on a search for a new superintendent, unfortunately, at this point. But the good news is we still have Jeff over the, with that advance supporting our district from a different level, right? Which is great news as well. And then even small things that, they're large things, free breakfast program, free lunch programs. And this is really a great report coming back from the summer. So fantastic job.
Thank you, sir.
All right, moving into the Board of Education Chair's report. I have a couple quick things here. Jeff had hit on some of them. The tri-board meeting, we have been meeting, Jeff, myself, the chairwoman of the Board of Finance, as well as our first selectman, Dan Jerem. We've kind of focused mainly on the ARPA funding as of our recent meetings. As Jeff had gone through, those funds that were initially allocated to the New Hartford Elementary School roof are available. We will lose them if we don't spend them. So that the tri-board meeting talked a lot about where the best place to spend them was, and here in this building, based on the work that the task force has been doing, made the most sense to address some of the deferred maintenance that we had here at the school. So those are all great improvements that have happened over the summer, and I invite you to go out back and take a look at what's been done with the paving. Unfortunately, electrical work is really not something to showcase, but if you could plug your phone or your TV in and not get shocked, it's probably a good thing for our students. Next item is the educational cost share. Last meeting, if you remember back into your memory banks when we met, we talked about the ECS supplement that we had received. There was some conversation and some discussion about the way it needed to be allocated by our town, by the Board of Finance and the selectmen. I'm happy to report that through the meetings, everything is done correctly. We were awarded the $172,000. Approximately 94 of that was applied to reduce taxes for the town, and the balance went to the surplus. So it was applied correctly, which is a great thing. And then the last piece of the chair report is in your package. We do have a memorandum that was sent over to Christine Hayward regarding the retention. If you remember, we talked about the meeting minutes and filing the attachments with all of our meeting minutes. There was some discussion about reducing the amount that went with it. We did go to the state and ask them for their guidance. They provided that to us. We did provide that over to the first selectman's office. So at this point, we are still delivering, as we have always, our meeting minutes with the attachments that go along with each one of our meetings. Any question on the Board Education Chairs Report? Seeing none, we will move on to item F, which is routine business. We have two items, the approval of minutes from the June 2nd, 2026 meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve? We have a motion by Frank, second by Kirby. Are there any discussion regarding the June 2nd minutes? Any changes, modifications, revisions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed?
I'm not opposed, I'm
Abstain.
abstaining because I wasn't there.
All right, motion passes 8-0-1. Okay, next item on the agenda is the expenditure report. Can I get a motion to approve the expenditure report?
So moved.
Moved by Penny. Can I get a second? Second by John. Is there any discussion regarding the current expenditure report? Superintendent Sousa.
All right. So as I alluded to earlier, if we would turn to page, well, first, if you notice, it's the fiscal year 25-26. First of all, it's not this current year's now because we're wrapping up last year's, and I want to update everybody. The next year's budget will be in the September Board of Education meeting. So the 25-26, just to conclude this because we are overlapping now, you'll see on page 3, in the middle of the page, you'll see that the general fund from a $10 million and a half budget to a 10.4, we're looking at including the $323 to that figure of $134, $860, and $11. So if you add that 323, we're approximately $135,000 that was not expended over the course of the year. That is not the final figure. This, again, I would remind the Board of Education, we had several unpaid leaves. So that constituted this and a change in an outplacement. So that's why there's this amount of money for those unpaid medical or unpaid leaves and also the outplacement change. So this amount of money will then go through the audit process. It's currently going through EFS, and the auditors will begin to schedule time with our central office staff to begin to review every expense, every grant, every single thing under the sun, and all of our lines. So that will begin at the end of the month. But I wanted to point that out for the boards to understand how we closed out approximately with $135,000 in consideration. That will not be finalized until, again, March or whenever the auditors are completed with that process. So then the option there would reside for the board to place that in non-lapsing to be determined at a future period of time. But I just wanted to set that up and put that on the platform for you guys to understand and know.
Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we have a motion by Penny, a second by John to approve the expenditure report as printed. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is under new business. We have a new school facility utilization task force report, status, and discussion on next steps. I will turn it over to Kristen and John. Yes, and Penny, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So we had a couple of meetings over the summer. I just want to kind of update everybody here. We are really at the end of our work with Silver Petroselli in terms of the research plan that they had laid out. And so everything from here forward is really being carried forward by us in terms of like what we want to do to finalize recommendations for the task force. So we have completed our cost phasing and reimbursement modeling for various options for the schools. So on July 16th, we walked through a bunch of different configurations for the schools based off of various scenarios, whether or not we consolidated. There were sort of like 5 main threads of scenarios. So one is really maintaining the 3 schools. The maintaining the 3 schools has sort of a range of options, including just kind of like leaving everything as is, but also taking into consideration the fact that at Bakerville, Bakerville in particular, the portables are nearing their end of usable life. And will need to be replaced with some various things. So the one element is really looking at that component for Bakerville. There's another option thread. It's really the option B line that's talking about combining pre-K through 2nd grade in one existing school, and then taking a look at like any work that would need to be done at Antolini. The third thread is really taking a look at new pre-K through second construction on the Antolini campus up here in particular. So that looks at basically building a new building up here, off to the side, separate from here, not being disruptive to anything from the, not being disruptive to any existing schools for that, but with the goal of closing down the other two schools and relocating K through 2 in one new building up here. The fourth option is one district-wide school, which would also be looking at Antolini. And then the third option is really option E, which is taking a look at whether or not it makes sense for us to consolidate pre-K through first grade at New Hartford Elementary or Bakerville and move second grade up here, which was an option that the task force wanted to explore. So those are sort of the three main threads. There were various flavors of all of those options here, but we have basically costs for all of those in terms of what we would need to do to accommodate the programming at each of those, under each of those options here. I'm not going to go into all of that right now because this is not a final report. I'm just letting you all know kind of like where we are. That will be another day and it will be a fun project for everybody. At our last reading, I think we had our first formal narrowing of like options down. So when we were looking at the different options, particularly for consolidating pre-K through second grade at either Antolini or Bakerville, we really looked at what would need to be built out on the site for those two options. Is extensive construction to get all of the programming and like the students into one space for each of those. And so when we were looking at all of those, the one thing that we did take off, the one thing that we decided unanimously to remove from like exploring any further is doing extensive construction at Bakerville. So again, the option of closing down New Hartford Elementary and like trying to put everybody on the Bakerville site, that was, we could not see a path towards really making that feasible given the size of the site, the amount of work that would need to be done, the phasing and so on and so forth. So we just kind of like took that off the table as like, this is one less thing for us to consider. I will say that the site work to consolidate pre-K through 2 over at Antolini also seems somewhat problematic, but there is like potentially a path forward there. So we're kind of leaving that as an option for now. It would take what? At New Hartford. Yep. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. So calling me out on that. So again, just in terms of, if you guys are familiar with the site down there, it's like sort of like we could in theory build a wing off of the back. There's a lot of like questions about the floodplain back there and like what can actually fit. There's other questions about whether or not the site is even suitable, but like, again, we have pricing for where that is right now. Generally speaking, none of the options that we're looking at, just in case anybody asked this question, include building a second story on top of an existing building structure. That was something that SPA did not recommend us even exploring, simply for the fact that doing that work would be so disruptive to the school. If anything that is being built on the second floor, you would not be able to use the first floor underneath it. So we'd have to find a way to like move those students to another school while doing that work. And it just seemed like that was not a good option there. Let me see. Okay, great. So anyway, that's where we are. We still have a lot of options on the table, I guess, is basically like what we're looking to do. What I want to make sure everybody is aware of. We did a staff survey. We distributed 97 of those surveys. We got about 57 back. In terms of the staff survey, we got, the summary of that survey is that a majority favors some form of consolidation, with a smaller group favoring the status quo of what's going on. The top concerns that were highlighted by the staff were really just around staffing changes, facility capacity, and class size. The most cited facility deficiency that was raised by the staff was the condition of general classrooms in particular. So again, I want to make sure that the Board of Ed is aware of that. This is related to things like inadequate outlets within the classrooms for current technology, temperature control, not necessarily worrying so much about specialized space within the school. So again, there'll be a more formal readout and summary of that report on Thursday, but something for us to consider as we're taking a look at all of the options here. Note, I would say that the survey option was about school options in general and not specific to any of the options in detail. It was just kind of like, would you rather, like hypothetically, like be in one building versus 2 versus 3, and not specific to like this program or this program or this program, just so we could get some feedback from people. That was part of what we were trying to accomplish there. Sorry. We've gotten a good amount of a decent amount of community input. We've had some folks coming asking a lot of questions. For those of you who want a better understanding of what those questions were, as well as our responses to them, we'll direct you to the website for the task force, which is underneath the Board of Ed website. There's a specific page. All all of those communications were either done in public comment in meetings or sent as communications to the task force. So if you're looking for them on the website, all the information was in the minutes of every meeting to kind of like go along with the content of that meeting and give you a little bit of a better understanding of what was going on there. There were some good questions raised. I would say I'm not really ready to like read out like a formal summary of that. And I don't think we've gotten all the community input that we have, but we've had a pretty steady stream of engagement across the meetings from some folks who are asking good questions. We did also determine some things came up during the course of this that were items that were out of scope for what the task force is looking at. So things like whether or not we should be doing any boring up here at Antonini to understand whether or not there was even any expansion options up here. We're taking that off the table right now from a task force perspective. It's preliminary without a real building plan. Other things around like whether or not like what the cost would be for an oil to propane conversion, which requires energy modeling that's outside the scope for SPA right now, and then a more detailed traffic and site analysis for each of the locations. They're not really in scope for SPA, and we don't have a better way of kind of addressing those questions right now. So those are some open questions regarding the options that, yeah, I just don't have a clear path on how to get answers to those right now, and we may not get to those answers before being able to make a recommendation to the board. I think one of the biggest things that we're sort of faced with right now is that all the configurations for the new schools are like for any configuration of like what the schools would look like is really taking a look at programming that is a little bit beyond what we are offering within the schools right now. And so it's things like separating the gym and cafeteria for some of the buildings, right size art and music space, expanded special education and intervention. This goes a little bit back towards like whether or not we want to keep students outplaced versus this. Some breakout space, some larger kitchens. So that programming element is like it's a pretty substantial share of the square footage needed that was modeled into all of the floor plans that we have right now. But we don't have clear building specs for any of this right now. And so it's a little bit of a challenge in terms of being able to like truly understand like what the cost would be like by for each of those, knowing that that's a little bit of a gap that like would require narrowing by anybody who moves this project forward. And what is very clear is that it is not the remit of the task force to make any decisions regarding programming within the schools. We're looking at the options based off of the input that we have available to us, but it is not the remit of the task force to say, you know, like we should be offering these services or like we need to prioritize, you know, a separate gym and cafeteria for various things. So again, that's work that I would expect to kind of come back to the Board of Education in some way, shape, or form to like make a determination about what would actually happen if we decided to move forward with any sort of building configuration.
Put at two ends of the spectrum here, is it doing the absolute bare minimum?
And to kind of to crystallize that point there, and I'm not taking a side here, nor is the task force, but you know, one is doing the absolute bare minimum, and so you know, minimum state requirements, nothing more, and then the far end is like, you know, not just future proofing, but going as modern and kind of cutting edge as possible. And so again, not saying that either is the right way, but kind of as we think about the task force and the work there, the amount of programming that is included in these designs determines this, as Kristen said, the square footage, and it may be a difference in some of these areas between, hey, this can fit or cannot fit. And so this is where with the Board of Ed having responsibility for the programming along with administration, that input is a critical input to enable some of the next steps with the task force under the current direction. And so that's, you know, just kind of highlight some of one of the topics that Kristen's talking about so that folks are understanding kind of what we're working through in the task force side.
The other major component is that, like, you know, the reality is that the school buildings all have like significant deferred maintenance at this time. They're way out of, they're compared to what would be built net new right now. There's just such a substantive difference in terms of the interior of the schools, what kind of facilities would be offered, the way things would be structured. And I think there are like real and valid questions about the useful life that is remaining within our school buildings, particularly for Bakerville and for New Hartford Elementary. I'm going to look at you and remind myself to say that. So, you know, I think everybody like knows that, but like we've got numbers to kind of just talk about what that deferred maintenance like really looks like right now. And it's a lot just to get it up to like a regular standard for like what a new building would look like. So when we're thinking about all of the options here, you know, it's just, in my mind, it's important to keep all of that in place. Anything that we do would be a cost that would be laid out to the town over time, either deferred maintenance or whatnot. So we're really looking at what the total, what our understanding of the total work involved would be as of right now, with some escalations for like anything that we would expect to be working on over time.
Kristen, on that point so it's, there is deferred maintenance, but then given that, depending on what assumptions are used and how far we're going to push on catching up with the deferred maintenance and the useful life of the buildings, at what point is it not worth putting, new money into older buildings versus looking at putting that money into really moving forward? And so are we trying to catch up and kind of optimize where we are, or take a step forward more toward, future proofing and kind of going ahead? And so again, these are some of the conversations that we as a community will need to decide, but this is also, again, where the Board of Ed wants a task force to be looking or not looking to be able to help task force and the public be efficient with the work ahead here.
One more thought, and this is just really one of the things that we wanted to do and like have set out to do is trying to get more specific input through the community through a stakeholder survey. We have not initiated that right now because the thought is that there are still too many options on the table to like responsibly send a survey out to the community. So we're hoping to try to narrow that down a little bit more before we get any community input from that. I'm just not sure we have enough information or a path forward to get some of that information for that to be a viable option for us to do. Our next meeting is on Thursday of this week. DATCO will be there talking about transportation and busing related to all of these schools. So if we shut down one of the schools or consolidated, what would the impact be to the contract, the timing for schools and stuff like that. So that information is forthcoming. I had previously talked to Superintendent Souza about trying to get some cost analysis about what would happen if we again sort of like consolidated schools from one building to another. Again, at that time, there were still too many options on the table to really understand, like it wouldn't be as easy as just saying, if we move students, we close down one school, like everybody who's associated with that school like wouldn't need to be there. There's different variables that go into that. So we're hoping for like a little bit more narrowed options to get to a better number for that. I don't have that right now either. And that's where we're at. Any questions? Penny, did I forget anything that you think is important?
No.
Okay.
Let me ask you this question. When you mentioned if you added a second floor to a building, it would be just, you couldn't use the floor underneath. What happens if you go with that plan where they suggested adding a second floor to New Hartford? Is it new classrooms underneath or existing classrooms?
The expansion, if we were to consolidate pre-K through 2 at New Hartford, the model that they've mapped out, and again, these are just sort of like test building specs. I want to be very clear about this. It's just sort of like, this is how we think that this could work. Anything that would move forward that could result in a different building configuration based off of the building models or the specs or anything that we get to at that point. But the general theory is that they would be building a whole new 2-story wing on the back of New Hartford Elementary. So it wouldn't be building a second floor over the first floor. It would just be building a whole new building in the back. So there wouldn't be a disruption to the class. Like there would still be a little bit of disruption, but it wouldn't be disruptive to the classrooms and schools. A little bit, like it's very casual, but that's sort of how it's getting around that. The same, yeah, I think that's right.
And the fact that it's in a floodplain is not of any concern? I don't know. I'm just curious. I don't really know. What is a floodplain where the river overflows and?
So what we have talked about with this is that like there is some floodplain back there. It's, again, all of the water table, all that stuff is different. The reality is that like humans are a marvel of engineering. So it is possible to build in a floodplain if you're willing to put in enough money to like stabilize where the building is going. So it's not just like, oh, there's a floodplain, we can't build back there. It is, what would the cost be to actually build that part of the building back there? And is that something that we want to pursue? And again,
Okay.
that's something that the task force can't answer right now
Right.
because that requires a real direction, a real building plans, anything else from a construction perspective that I'm not thinking about, but feel free to correct me, my construction expert. But that's basically where we are.
I mean, it's just, I've been watching all these floods on television and I've always said, we never thought this river would overflow.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly, it is something that would have to be taken into consideration.
Right.
I believe that because it's in a floodplain, we would have to take special care to make that, but what that additional cost would be, I don't know.
Okay.
I believe there's a reserve, that's probably not the right word, but there's a reserve set aside within the scoping for that to kind of say this is something that would probably need to be looked at or addressed.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So to bring the conversation up, kind of thinking from the recent task force meetings, as noted, there's a big critical input, I would say, from the Board of Education and the administration in terms of the programming to determine what the task force should consider some of these options. And then kind of a second part of that is what are the goalposts? And there's a common question about what's the end state? What's the timeline? Kind of where are we trying to get to here? And so given there's been a significant amount of work done over, past 6+ months by the task force and the community, thought this is an appropriate time, not just on the programming topic as one topic for discussion, but also what the Board of Ed wants the goalposts to be. If they are the current goalposts of working to get toward, a recommended option or two for the Board of Ed to consider, that can be a path with some inputs. If the task force is more toward bringing a series of options to the Board of Education, that would be helpful as well. And so there's some key inputs the task force needs from the Board of Education and potentially the tri-chairs in terms of where this work should go here. And so again, the programming topic is one that came up, but the related topic is kind of those goalposts and making sure as we embark on this next phase of the task force here over the coming days this week, but then weeks and months, making sure that we're aligned on where the task force is going to ultimately come back to the Board of Ed. And so that's where, there's some discussion here that as a liaison seems to be helpful for the task force and the community to have some more insight on. Kristen, Benny, please.
I have a comment on that. So at the end of the day, the task force will bring back, I'm going to say, just use a round number, 5 options. Just,
I hope it would be fewer.
okay, good. All right, 4.
That's first to confirm. Is it
But,
like-
yeah.
is
All
it-
right, let's just say there's 4 options,
Yeah.
ranging, you can title them whatever you like, but there's 4 options and there's gonna be a price tag associated with each option, obviously. You could bring back the board of, the consolidation, your board, your utilization task force recommends option B, right? You put that in front of this board, we can say, well, I don't like option B, and 6 of us vote option C, right? But ultimately, it should come down to the town, right? So to me, the task force is gonna come back with 4, 5, 3, whatever options you guys, and all your hard work, I applaud. You come back with 4 options, whatever, you put them in front of the board, we're gonna, toss them around, but at the end of the day, there's gonna be a price tag associated that we're not in a position to say, yeah, we're gonna spend $15 million of the town's money because we wanna do this. No, that's gotta go to a town referendum anyway.
Yep.
Right, so to answer your question, I think would expect 3 or 4 or 5 options just for us to talk about, but that's gotta be ultimately put, maybe we decide to put 3 of them in front of the town instead of 5, right? That should be our only decision-making process, if I understand this correctly.
That's my understanding, and that's what we've been communicating as well, is that the task force remit is to do this research, analyze what options, essentially get as far down the path as we can, make recommendations to the Board of Ed, but then it's the Board of Ed's decision to either action on the recommendation or not action on the recommendation, and depending on what action they take, like what that looks like, if they want to go forward with that, we hear. So I'm in alignment with you that that's what my expectation of the process would be. Next task force makes a recommendation to the Board of Ed. That's the way it was originally set up. The Board of Ed decides what, if anything, they want to take to the town for feedback from them. So we're trying to get everything as good, and that's why we wanted to. That was why I was really hoping to get a community survey out as part of this, so that feedback could be taken into consideration by the Board of Ed, because I know that's a big piece of that, and then that would also help us understand a little bit more about like what other things have we not heard from the town right now that we would want to know before like putting it out for like a referendum or something like that, right? And like trying to go through all that process. So I don't know we're going to be able to solve everything, but like that was the intention.
So I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm only saying with a community survey, if it doesn't have any dollar value associated with it, it's going to be strictly a feeling. Let's close Bakerville.
Yeah.
Well, that price tag comes with an $18 million price tag, whereas deferred maintenance on all three buildings comes with a $5 million price tag, right? Oh, all right. Well, maybe I don't want to close Bakerville. I'm just using it as an example.
Yeah.
So just putting a survey out there saying, what would you like to do makes no sense to me because it's all based on emotion at that point.
Right.
So until
Totally.
we have a price tag associated with the 4 or 5 options that you guys want to bring back to us, I don't think input from the town is, other than getting people, I wanted to close Bakerville for 15 years. Fine, I get to say yes, right? Well, not necessarily,
Yeah.
because it comes with some price tag.
Totally agreed. Right now, we have a range for the price tags, right? And the range is like deferred maintenance bare minimum, or like what it would cost to bring our programming standards up to like what would be appropriate if you were like starting a school from scratch this year. And that's sort of like where we have a range for each of those options that kind of falls within that. It's a substantive range because of what I was talking about with the programming options. And so like when you're really looking at it that way, like the minimum option across all 3 schools is like probably around like 30 million. That's including the deferred maintenance across all 3 buildings. The top line number is really around like 94 million, and that's, for everything else there. So every option will have a range. The ranges will overlap based off of the options, and it will be a pretty wide spread. So that's sort of where that's still a little bit of a challenge, because even if I put those ranges out there from a community perspective, I still think people are going to be like, I don't know what to do with this. So that's why I was kind of at least hoping to like get a little bit more direction, either narrow us down a little bit more, or get more direction around like, there's anything we need to consider from a programming perspective, or, like, yes, like this is what we're doing. This is what we should be looking at. This is what we should be taking to a town. Like, I just want everybody to know what all the options are there, basically, in terms of the numbers that we have available to us.
Each option will have, again, like you say, there's a wide range, right? It could be between $5 and $20 million for option A, between $15 and $40 million for option B. But each option will come with its relative gravity, right? Its specific gravity, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's right or wrong, each option will have a specific density to it in cash flow, right? So there is a way to gauge that, whether you're not going to be able to narrow it down, no matter how much work you guys do to nail it down, probably within $5 million.
Yeah.
There's such a wide range of things that have to be done, could be done, should be done, need to be done, like to have done, right? I know when I've read the surveys, there's all kinds of different color codes in there. So
yeah, there's so many things, and even within the deferred maintenance bucket. So again, when we figure out how to get all of this to you without producing a 200-page report for you, it might be a 200-page report, sorry. But the deferred maintenance and that line for each of the buildings, the way that it's structured from a data perspective is all of the maintenance options are broken out into 4 tiers. Priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4. So like that deferred maintenance number, the bottom range, the range that we have right now includes assuming that we're doing all of that work for all of the buildings right now. There are some of those things that the board may not choose to do, and it would be probably fine from the perspective of the state. You know what I mean? So again, there's just a lot of nuance here in terms of the numbers. The way I've been trying to think about it for myself, just to help me get a direction, is that they're relative numbers to one another. Like we can't anchor on like the number that is put in front of us, but those numbers are going to change. They're really relative to help us understand the various options between the two, and not really think about like this said this is going to cost $40 million. Like that's what it's going to cost, and this is what we have. Because it's really just about helping us weigh the different options there.
So my thought goes to, have you thought about a baseline? What's the baseline should be? We have 3 schools today.
Yeah.
Right? We have a list of deferred maintenance by those 3
Yeah.
schools. And by the state's definition of square footage, we have excess space, right? For instance, the rooms across the hall.
Mhm.
So you have your base option that says, here's your range. If you went with priority 1, 2, or 3, or A, B, and C, whatever it might be, and you're going to have a range for what we have today. Then I think about the next option. If you stay with the 3 school system and you said you wanted to add some programming, right? And that programming was added because we had the additional square footage with those across. So what's that going to cost? Then you look at, again, I'm just thinking out loud. Then you look at, okay, what if you want to consolidate the 2-school system? And then you say, in order to do that, you're now going to close one of the schools. You're going to move over. You're going to have transportation costs to change. You're going to have the building that you're closing down. You got to get the cost for that. You have renovation costs in the school that you're going to consolidate to. And then you go with that option. I mean, I don't know based on what you just described, is there ever an option that the task force is thinking we're going to close 2 schools and have one large one up here? Right. So you got to look at that and say, hey, that's off the table if that's the case. I'm not saying that, but that's off the table. That's not going to happen. But we've got to be able to Tom's point, we've got to be able to inform the town and the community. This is the kind of money we're talking about.
Yeah.
Or the town may say, leave it as it is, right?
Yeah.
And we know we have this maintenance, we've got to pick it up, and we've got to do that over time.
Yeah.
That could be. Or the town may say, we're 100% on board with, let's renovate these, let's increase the programming, let's do what we need to. Again, when you hear about these $500,000 grants, that can help us build programming here in the school and use the square footage we have. So there's so many variables, which is very difficult.
Yeah.
But to me, I just look at, you have to create a baseline with what we have.
Yeah.
Right? And know that baseline has certain conditions,
Yeah.
right? That go along with it. That says, if we keep what we have this deferred maintenance, we know we have to do it over time. We have additional square footage that we could use a grant for, or the space is vacant, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But then you have to go to that next piece, right? But to have 5 or 6 options, I think gets a little crazy too,
Yeah.
right? So I think you have to try to stay with this under 5, hopefully.
I would like to
Right?
get to
In
under
some
5.
way.
I think we've got too many.
But we have to understand the appetite of the community,
Yeah.
right? Does the community have the appetite to say, we're going to do anything outside of the 3-school system and deal with the maintenance right now?
Yeah.
Right? What is that? What is that baseline?
Yeah.
And do we understand what that is
Yeah.
right now?
So we do understand what that baseline is. Again, right now, that baseline, the way that it's framed in here, we have numbers for not doing anything, but one big element of that is the Bakerville portables being at their end of life. And so doing anything to address the portables, which really needs to be done, could potentially open up the building itself to needing more work on the interior to actually do that. That would sort of force us into doing more of the deferred maintenance than maybe we would want to be doing, right? So you start opening up those walls, and then the walls are open, and then a bunch of other things need to be addressed. I'm really kind of trying to dumb that down, but
Of
for an
course.
example. So
Mhm.
the baseline, again, that's a factor that if we were just looking at maintenance, does replacing the portables, which are again at the end of their useful life, is that deferred maintenance, or is that a significant renovation? It becomes a significant renovation.
I think it is. In my opinion, I think it is. It's
Right.
deferred maintenance, right?
Right.
But it's a piece that
Right,
has to
but
be
it
part of
triggered
the
a whole bunch of
Right.
upgrades.
It's
that
got to
would
be part of that
necessary to the
high-end
building.
range, right? Of your baseline, it has to be part of the high-end range.
And then there are
We
things
need that
within that
space.
baseline, again, that logically, if you're in there doing some of that stuff, it would be if you're ever going to address this maintenance, now is the time to do it while things are,
Right.
while you're digging into the building and kind of have to shut it down for other things. So
Mhm.
again, it's not a super easy question to answer and just say very cleanly, this is the path that should be going down for
Yeah.
any of this, which has been really fun to do all this work and get to this point. So,
I appreciate you all doing all this work because, yes, it's not very clear cut and straightforward.
Those have been at the end of their useful life since the last time we had this conversation 12 years ago, just so you know.
Well,
That was
I mean,
a,
but only
that
comes
was a
down to-
talking point used by the people who wanted to close Bakerville, that these are at the end of their useful life. Well, that was 12 years ago, and I'm not sure what they look like now, but I don't know.
I mean, I
They're
understand.
not bad.
They're
I haven't
they're
been
not
there-
great.
I haven't been in there in a while. So.
I was in there earlier this year. They're not great. The classrooms are crowded. The hallway is crowded. It's there's just a lot of different things about it that I think the conversation, and again, this is my personal opinion. I want to be very clear about that. That the conversation is about how much do we really want to defer maintenance when we pride ourselves on our educational school system, and our schools don't meet modern standards for educating our kids. Our teachers are like plugging things in all over the classroom. Someone told me that one of the classrooms earlier this year was like up to like 95 degrees, like inside of it, like those kind of things. Like, sure, the kids can still go in and like learn how to read and like learn how to do math, but like, is it the ideal environment for that? Or even like a best fit environment if it's not all the way up at the top? And I think that there's a lot of room in there that like we have not, this town has not fully addressed. And it's hard to sit and say that we don't want to put money into the schools because of a like flatlining in student enrollment population, but know that like these are challenges that our students and teachers and staff are dealing with every day and like working around right now. And that's really where I'm struggling in terms of this. I don't like sitting here year after year and trying to figure out the budget and all of that, but like I do think that the schools need some work. I think that deferred maintenance like adds up over time to a subpar experience for the people who are in the buildings every day. And it's very easy for people who aren't in there to like say, this is fine, or that was fine when I was in there 30 years ago. It's been 30 years. And that's really why I'm struggling right now. And again, that's my personal opinion in terms of just what I'm seeing right now, but it's hard to look at. It's really hard to look at.
So building on that, a key question, I'm a task force hat, board of ed hat, community member, taxpayer, parent, but thinking about this board self-evaluation that's coming up here and looking actually at the mission, vision, purpose, and why we are here as Board of Education members and what our responsibilities are. Is the Board of Education going to actually form a perspective on, say, programming or the future of the schools, or is the task force, or is it public vote? And so I think to Kristen's point, that's what she said as an individual. And setting aside my personal views, is the Board of Education going to provide a perspective to the task force and the community on what their view is, or is it simply, a town vote here? And so I don't know the answer to that question. We're all working through this task force for, I guess some did say Bakerville, but this task force here is new. And so I think we're really at a critical point from the task force perspective and also for the community of what are there's a lot of variables here. And if the Board of Education has a perspective that the board wants to make known, I would say that from a board perspective, that we're reaching the point where the board needs to either put the perspective out there and discuss that and advocate in some way, or not. And there's a coming choice here, and no action is an action, a choice. And so that's where I'm not saying that what that should be, but just raising that there is that opportunity for input here and the Board of Education to be more of a leading role in this, or let the task force and public kind of roll forward. It has to be a team effort, but if the Board of Education has a perspective based on their responsibility as the Board of Education, that really does come into play programming and some of where the task force is going.
I mean, I guess I get your question, John, and I would say from my perspective as a board member, our role is to advocate for the educational system we have in New Hartford. To that end, I would say that we would want to be, if we were to build a new school or we were to renovate, we would want to understand the cost of current century learning, right? What does that cost, right? And that cost is going to be the high end of that spectrum. It's going to create more square footage, but we have to understand at least some range of what that is, right? So again, I go from that baseline to that high end.
Yeah.
And what is that? And then we have to measure the community's reaction to what does the community want? Because we're a 9-person board. And of course, we should be advocating as Board of Education members for the best interest of our students, right? And children in our town, also being fiscally responsible, right? Which is very difficult when you're talking about 30, 40, 50 million dollars in a small town of 7,000 people, right? But we, at least from my opinion, I would advocate for current century learning, right? But what is that price tag, right? Versus what we have today. And that's the kind of the understanding that I would hope in some way, and I know it's not easy, in some way we could get some idea of that from the task force.
And I think it's where it's helpful because if, for example, that current century learning were not going to be considered, then if the Board of Education would say no to that, then the task force spending time on that is.
I think we'd be remiss as a Board of Education not to be looking at that and have that as something that's our star out in the future that we're trying to get to, right? And again, I speak for myself, right? I don't, the rest of the board, right, should speak, but that's my opinion, right? So we have to understand what it is.
Yeah. What do others think? I mean, that's where, if the board's of the mindset of considering and wanting to hear more about, from where we are right now toward a more aspirational view, then I think then that helps to justify doing the work on that. If there's not an appetite to even consider that, then it'd be helpful to know that now so we don't waste everyone's time with something that the board wouldn't want to consider.
Well, the board's made up of 9 individuals, right? So you say the board, well, you're never going to get the board to come up with any kind of 9-person consensus, especially when you're talking about the subject we're talking about, right? So everyone's got their own personal opinions, which is what we're voted on to the board to do and advocate for the constituency that put us here. So we're going to have our own opinions and they may not all drive. So when you're asking for the board's opinion, you're not going to get that. You're going to get, Tom Buzzy's opinion, which I'm always easily hand out, right? And there's other people who are going to hand theirs out. And so, that's what you're going to get. So you're going to have to take.
Well, that's better than silence.
No,
We'll take
100%.
that,
So
yeah.
you're going to have to take what
Yeah.
Tim just said and
I'll take
what I've said.
Yeah, we're just trying to have
Yeah, we're
your
just trying to have a
perspectives.
discussion. here.
Understood,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying you're getting the board's
Yeah.
input right now.
Yeah.
Because that's all you get. You're not going to get all of us. Yep, we all voted exactly what Tom said. You're not going. It's never going to happen.
No, agreed.
Right.
No,
So
no.
that's all. That's my point
Yeah.
right now.
That's what we want to hear. And also, just as Kristen said, there's public comment here tonight. They were looking at having public information session. I don't know, overcommit, but public information opportunities with the meetings, more of the sessions. Like the survey Kristen mentioned. So there's multiple opportunities here. But just again, make sure that the Board of Education is aware, and if there is perspective that members have, that would be helpful for the task force and the community.
I think that the task force, right, as I think of it, is a data collecting, right? That's what the idea was, is that the last time this came up, there wasn't enough studying done, right? This is all about studying where we are and where we could go. And to have the values, right, to have those price tags is important, right? So we can understand it and the community can understand it. Because we are 9 people. We could decide we want to do anything, but without the backing of the community, we're not doing any of it, right? So I think that information is important, and how difficult it's going to be to get it is probably, again, it's not going to be perfect, right? And that's what everybody has to understand. Whatever comes out of the task force, the price tags that our hired consultants give us are based on square footage prices, without boring data, without understanding the structural integrity of these buildings, or whether or not we could put a second floor on it because they're not structured that way. There's a lot of unknowns that come with it. The task force is challenged with not knowing the programming, right? Because the process of going to referendum and then going to a programming is a long process with professionals and the Board of Education, with our administration creating the programming that we're looking for. That process hasn't started yet and won't start unless there's a referendum and again, appetite from the community that we want to go down that road. And that's a long process. And to get there, to get any certainty with cost, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it comes down to the cost too.
Yeah.
Seeing what the cost is, because really, if you look at it, our most important assets, teachers, our administrators, right? We have great teachers and administrators. So we know that our kids are going to get taught very well. So it really comes down to the cost of the building, what's going to be the most effective long-term for us to kind of move forward. And then the other thing I had to say was, and you may have passed by it a little bit, just a concern that I had. If we were looking at merging the 3 schools here, have we looked at if we have the opportunity for additional parking and traffic flow on this private road for drop-off, pickup, buses? Concern there would be blocking the fire department, blocking any other emergency responses, things like that.
Yep. So the plans for that, again, they're just like test plans. They're, there's work that would need to be done to validate that. But when you're looking at the consolidation to either campus, either having like 2 buildings up here or just having one, The test plans do include additional parking, identifying drop-off areas for, like if everything's up here, like a pre-K drop-off area versus other kid drop-off area. There was a floating of a road that would go out this way. I'm going to point because we're up here and like go down that path. There's obviously some skepticism about actually making a road down there so we have a second egress given the hill that's over there. But again, to the point that I was talking about with the floodplains, humans are a marvel. If you really wanted to do it, you could do anything. So those are included again in the test fit program, just to get an idea of what that could possibly look like. And it was sort of like, you know, building out more parking over there, putting an entrance back over there, and that. There are maps for that. If you're like really curious, I can send you links. All of that stuff is in the presentation materials that are uploaded on the website. If you look at the ones from our last meeting, which was, I think, was July 11th. I don't remember the, I think, but the July meeting in there, no, the 17th. All of those kind of like are laid out there, and I'm happy to like answer any additional questions on you for that. But if we, any recommendation we make or any information we bring forward would kind of have those visualizations that we have already. You're welcome.
My personal thought is I would want to hear every single option. I don't have a line. Sorry. Oh, I would want to hear every option, every dollar amount, because that's what we're here to do, is to evaluate and support you guys in any way that we can. So I don't care if it's 3 options or 6 options, but I want to hear them all. And I think it's very important. And that's what we all signed up for, is to do this job.
Thank you.
How about 26 options?
Yeah, maybe not 26.
Well, no, but there's been a lot of options the task force has gone through, and that's where, I mean, so it could be some catch up to kind of, you know, this is some of the backstory, but then as Kristen was trying to highlight, which is a lot verbally, slides would be helpful if, you know, here's where folks are kind of gravitating and here's some of the key decisions. And so that's where we're trying to kind of, it's this, you know, better than plane while flying the plane, or trying to gather input to help shape it. And
Yeah, there's a whole like separate work stream that we're trying to figure out how to address about like if the Board of Ed didn't want to like hear the current century options, like did we need to do a path of like narrowing down like the programming or stuff to like really get a better sense of like what that price tag would be in there, which is we don't have a good path for doing that right now either as well. But so those are just kind of like some of the things that I'm trying to make sure that we have identified all the questions that we need to ask and get addressed. We're presenting a report that like gives all the information that we don't know, along with potentially like questions or recommendations of things that we know would need to be determined, but we're outside of the scope of our work right now. If like one of these directions would need to be moved forward. Any other thoughts from anybody tonight?
All right, well, just let me give you my thought. And realizing my children didn't go to school here, just my grandchildren did. And that's the only reason we live here. If I always thought you should have a campus up here like some other school districts do. Like have the elementary schools, the little kids up on top of the hill or someplace in this campus. But the only thing is, after looking all the plans from SPA, it is very expensive. Like the road that Kristen was talking about, and they're worrying about ledge being up here. It's, as far as I'm concerned, it's the costliest thing that's there. While I hate to see Bakerville closed and go back to the town for some other use, I'm sure they can think of something else to do with it, but maybe that is, my personal opinion would be to close that school, move all the kids down to New Hartford Elementary, put some of them up here in those 3 classrooms across the hall, and merge the schools that way. But I mean, that's just my personal opinion, coming from a town that has all their schools in one spot, on one big plot of land.
this is where, just from a data perspective, I'm not taking an opinion here, looking at is the goal to put children into every available space that exists. I mean, that may not even fit unless you're literally using every single possible space, and then we're putting money into schools that are, you know, behind the times, or are we looking at making some investment toward expanding space? So that's where in the conversations, you know, there was this notion of these quote floating classrooms in some of the task force meetings, and and this is not like the current century learning, but even under some of the more reasonable scenarios, there would be some classrooms that wouldn't fit into kind of a slightly renovated New Hartford Elementary and having the space here. And so there are some real details and constraints in terms of these ideas that seem to work, and then kind of getting down to, unless you're going to the programming piece, where you're going to be in that programming spectrum, and how much toward, what deviating from current class sizes does someone want to be versus leaning in with money towards something in the future. And so I'm not saying your idea is a bad idea. It's just, this is an example of like, this idea could make sense in theory, but the existing space, the programming needs, the floodplains, if we need to go up here in some way, this hill, like there's just real world constraints here that we need to work through. And so this is where, we as a task force will need to work through gathering some more information, but also finding ways to present this in a succinct and understandable way so that we can have conversations and folks actually can vote at referendum. So.
I'm not saying fill every available
Oh, no,
space
no,
with a
yeah.
child, but I think they really need to have their own art room, and I wouldn't want to take that away. They
Yeah.
also need their own music room that they can go in and practice whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Or draw pictures or whatever.
That's a programming piece there. So this is really pieces come together. So yeah.
But I mean, at one time too, they also talked about putting solar panels up on the hill.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that in a while. I mean, I don't know how much land is up there. Is there enough land for building and solar panels? Who knows?
97 acres or something. So yeah.
I don't know.
Sounded flexible to me.
Kristen, what was or Don or Penny, what was I remember like the rankings of like 1 through 4, maybe in terms of like bare minimum, like safety necessities versus like would be top tier, best case scenario. What was that like?
So that maintenance number like came in around like 29 million, although again, that's been like revised upwards slightly to account for like the portable replacement. So like the concept that we're looking at there is like replacing the portables with a more permanent building structure that just like replaces the 4 classrooms. So the square footage is overall would be there. So that like the first iteration was 29. Right now with that, it's about 35 million, to sort of like keep the 3 schools as is.
So I'm specifically asking for like the term that was used for the rankings, like the 1 through 4, where it was like.
So within that number, within the 29 to 35 million dollars, there's a tiered set of costs that are like ranked 1 through 4, prioritized basically like you definitely need to do this. You should really consider do this. We strongly recommend doing this, and like this is a nice to have.
Yeah.
There are details for all of those. Those recommendations exist for all 3 buildings. They're spread across 6 different categories that I'm not going to remember all of them right now, but it's like the HVAC, the exterior, like
site, exterior, interior, plumbing, mechanical, electrical.
yeah. So in each of those buckets, there are like priorities that are ranked for each of those sort of like major components of a building. And again, when you're thinking about what the deferred maintenance would be, like if the town were to address all of those, like that's roughly what that cost would be if we were to do that. Not to say the town would definitely address all of those things, but that's the thing.
And for rough numbers, the priority 1s are 4.5, the priority 2s are 20. And then those are the 1s and 2s are the most likely to do. And then priority 3, 7.5, priority 4, 4.5. So I'm not saying that this is the answer. You would obviously go through the list, but the total across all 3 schools for priority 1 and 2 is 25 million.
And that includes things like
Sprinkler system.
a sprinkler system.
Yeah.
100%. Some of the
ADA.
HVAC stuff. What?
And ADA.
Compliance. Yeah. So I would say to like adding again, my personal opinion, I would say, hypothetically say everybody shoots down every opportunity and we just want to keep it the way it is. I would say that those 1 and 2, if those are the worst case scenario, like things that absolutely should be done kind of scenarios, I would say that I think it's really important that we revisit those. Just because Bakerville's been in existence forever doesn't mean that we like if you closed it today, it wouldn't be able to be reopened.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for people to know.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
So
those numbers will definitely be, they'll be here available for the board. It will be part of the record. I think it's something that when the transportation committee is like the facilities committee of the Board of Ed is like looking at things, like I would assume that they would take those into consideration, get some more feedback on those.
Kristen, John, Penny, thank you very much for the work you're doing on the task force. The rest of the task force members who are not here, thank you for the work you're all doing. I don't know if we helped you that much tonight, but we appreciate the report out and the conversation.
The discussion is important.
Right.
I think just in terms of knowing where to draw the line, right? Because again, just another important, because that like, we have to draw the line somewhere.
Mhm.
We say our work is done at some point, and knowing how many variables we can address, we just gotta figure out how far.
Well, thank you very much.
You can skip the reports if you want.
Old business, let me hit that first. Revision policy 5112,
Who I was talking about.
ages of attendance. We talked about, these are second reads. We have to do these. We have to, second reads. So can you bring us through that? Penny,
All right, so
5112, please.
5112 is ages of attendance, admissions, placements. All we did was change the effective date to July 1st, 2026, in accordance with the new, I don't know, guideline from the state, rule from the state, that you have to reach the age of 5 on or before the first day of September. As of this July 1st.
Perfect. This is a second read. Can I get a motion to approve policy 5112, ages of attendance, admission, placement? Motion by Frank, second by Penny. Any discussion?
I had a question on that. Just regarding the high end, right, 21 years, I know that's a requirement. I mean, obviously, it's probably not going to happen, but
Most likely
where is
not.
that consideration for a 21-year-old student walking around the halls with 10-year-olds?
Most likely not.
Well, and I know that.
Yep.
I know that,
That's
That's
for
what I'm
high school
saying, but this-
consideration.
right?
Yep.
But why, it just doesn't make sense for us to have this policy at all, but I don't want to
Well, this
squabble over it, but that's just kind of.
Sure. The policy's intent is to eliminate the waiver process, put into law what we are doing going forward. The waiver process was a gray area at best. It makes it very clear cut. September 1, you're 5, you're not, you're in kindergarten or you're not in kindergarten. So that was the intention. And then eliminating the form number 2 from the policy so that that is no longer an option. Those are the two major drives.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Just another policy.
Okay, any additional questions, comments on policy 5112? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Policy 5142, Penny?
Is on school safety preparation, response, and after action. Public Act 19-52 requires the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection to update state school security and safety plan standards, simplify certain school security reporting requirements and school security infrastructure grant applications, and develop criteria to identify qualified school security consultants and limit the existing registry to such individuals only. It also adds related duties for the State Department of Education and the School Safety Infrastructure Council. This is basically just all combining our school and safety plans, our preparation and response and after activity. It was just putting everything in one place. Questions?
Do we have the other policies in place that this references? Are we rescinding them as part of the adoption of this policy?
Yes, it's going to combine 3516, 5141.6, and 6114, forgive me. So the recommendation would be to rescind those 3 policies upon the adoption of 5142, which encompasses all 3. So
Okay,
again,
can I-
rescinding of 3516,
Right.
5141.6, and 6114.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve policy 5142, school safety, preparation, response, and after action, and rescind policies 3516, policies 6114, and policies 5141.6?
Yep.
Motion by Frank,
Second.
Second by Penny. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That is unanimous. All right, moving right along to our reports. The first one is Curriculum Subcommittee, Vision of the Learner. We could. Okay. Do we want to table these to our next meeting? Based on time, we still have an executive session and we have a public comment coming up.
I make a motion that we table these.
I will second that.
All right, we got a motion by Frank, second by Kristen to table the reports for tonight. Any objections? That is unanimous. Okay, next item on the agenda is item J, public comment. This is for agenda items only. Would anyone like to address the board? Come on up.
Is it on? My name is Shelley Lloyd. I live at 29 Pioneer Drive. I've been to all the task force meetings except one. So I think I have a fairly decent vision of what the task force is doing, and I thank them for their time. I'd like to urge the Board of Education to plan for the future. I know that compromises will probably have to happen, but I really would like you to take a look to the future and not just looking behind. And I'm saying that from the voice of experience. You'll see, if you look in the minutes for the meeting that's coming up Thursday, a very lengthy letter that I sent to the task force outlining things that happened in the school district I worked in, which is one town away from here, 30 years ago. And I listed out 14 things that were done when our school district consolidated 30 years ago. And I don't think it's unreasonable to request that those things be considered for the students in New Hartford 30 years later. I think that there are some things that you're missing here. I'm not sure how you can build or how you can make or recommend a building plan when you don't have the input of a structural or civil engineer. Mr. Kleps, you alluded to that. You don't know what's underground. You don't know what your foundations look like. How do you know you can add on to a building? How do you know you can build anywhere? I want to point out that this building that we're in right now was built on ledge. We're sitting in it, okay? It's been here for I don't know how many years. It's only had one driveway, okay? The whole time we've been here, and the fire station has always been at the bottom of this hill. When my kids were students here, there were kindergarten classes in this building, and there were 4 or 5 or even 6 of each of the other grades. So the number of students who were being bused to this facility when my kids came here probably isn't any different than it would be if you had all the students in the school district on this campus. I really would like to urge you folks to consider the need for some at least consultation or input from a structural and civil engineer to look at your current sites. In my opinion, you can build anywhere. You can build on ledge, you can build in floodplains, but you can't do any of that without the input of the right professionals.
Are we able to, like for the comment right there, am I not able to comment back, but just to underscore something from the task force? Just to, as the comments were made there, that the topic of the importance of engineering information as we consider some of these options has come up several times. And obviously there's a cost with doing some of that work, and depending on what the scope of the work is, as I'm sure you're familiar, Tim, from your day job. So that's one topic that, is, I'd say, kind of in a way above the pay grade of the task force itself, but there is a question about when that engineering information will come into play. And so just to thank you for all the comments and perspective, but that topic has come up several times and is an open question as the task force does proceed here. We'll likely hear it again. So I'm not sure, who and how in town to get the answers. Go ahead, Kristen.
Thanks, Dave. My understanding of that, again, is that what we're looking at here and what SPA has put together is just test fit sites. They're not real building plans.
Yeah, so we don't have information.
And I think this is one of those things that just being educated about the construction process is important for everybody to understand. Whatever recommendation the task force makes moving forward will not be this is the build, we're looking at buildings to get a better idea of what that would be, but it doesn't mean that that's the building that would be actually produce. So it is premature to look at some of that stuff from a structural engineering perspective for us to, at this juncture.
I'm not, well,
Hi, my name is Mary Beth Greenwood. I'm also a member of the School Task Force and Board of Selectmen. First, thank you to Mr. Sousa. You have made a difference in your time here, and thank you. Thank you to Mr. Sousa for your time here. You have made a difference, and you are appreciated. I want to go back to the discussion on the School Task Force. What you all said about you need numbers on the options is exactly what you should be asking for, and that's what we need to provide, but we're trying to form the options to see what should be costed out to give you. So I have some examples of areas where I feel like we are moving into Board of Ed realm. One example is moving the second grade to Antolini. That can be looked at as a purely financial decision, or it can be looked at changing the structure of your school district. You're changing the elementary school cutoff. Does the Board of Ed want to consider that? I mean, should we even be spending our time on that option? That's one example. Another example was addressed tonight. Should we be allowing for room for an expanded special ed program, bringing students back to district and also including students from other districts? That has come up as an option. Should we be considering that and putting room in the designs for that? Another question that has been brought up a couple of times is the number of preschool classrooms. That always seems to be, I don't know, kind of a hot football or whatever, but are we committed to maintaining this level number of preschool classrooms? That's a decision the Board of Ed makes, not the task force. And another thing that Kristen mentioned tonight is separating the gym and the cafeteria. Is that a priority? That's a huge difference in the designs. Are we satisfied with the way things work in the schools now with combining the gym and the caf, or are we looking to separate them? I mean, these are all things that make a big difference in the cost and the options and what we end up offering in the different scenarios. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking at that we need Board of Ed input on to be able to move forward in what we need to do. Thank you.
I'll speak again. Strong, very strong second. Those are examples that I should have mentioned, but again, I'm new to the Board of Ed, but if the Board of Ed doesn't speak until much later, we're going to community with information that doesn't have engineering, doesn't have Board of Ed input. So are we making good use of people's times? I don't know the answer to those questions, but again, trying to have some conversation here amongst the Board of Ed, whether it's members or the board itself, on some key topics to provide input. So apologize for commenting again.
Hi. Sorry, just a quick add. Sure. I guess I would want to understand to that end would be sort of what the turnover is like for the gym teachers versus the cafeteria staff, sort of what that day looks like throughout the schools. Is it very involved? Is it sort of a quick thing? Is it something that is really strenuous for everybody? That kind of thing. Are we cleaning the calf many more times than we probably would have to otherwise?
Yeah, it's
that kind of stuff.
It's at capacity now, and it could not add another grade level to have it function with the sections of PE required and then all the lunch waves. So it does not work. If you bring up another grade level, for example, in 3 more sections, it doesn't oprate because it's a shared space together. If they were separated, perhaps, but they're not right now.
Okay.
So it just doesn't work. It is involved. There's breakdown and setup of tables, the tables that go back up into the walls, but then the other setup of PE equipment is not. So it doesn't just happen. And that PE teacher is also our health teacher. So there's additional running around and traveling. Again, in the vein of being super efficient, you also lose some flexibilities.
Yeah.
Flexibility, but also time spent on health and wellness. What's the value of? I mean, if you're shrinking health and wellness time to fit in lunch cycles because you only have so much space, what's the right priority that the town, that the Board of Ed has for the kids. So that's where, again, these questions that are coming up in the task force that in theory, the Board of Ed should be having at least some perspective on, but that's, I guess, maybe the wrong question. I don't know.
Not so much the Board of Ed, but the educators and the administrators.
We'd
We'd like to hear from them.
We've got to stay with public comment. Thank you.
My name is Carmen Neal, 39 Spencer Brook Road. I am also part of the task force. And I want to thank Mr. Sousa for all the work you have done. We are going to miss you. I want to talk about something a little different. And actually, I was very happy to hear that in the future, next year, I think it is, there is going to be an idea of putting in the same plane all of the schools that feed into the regional system. Because from what I understand, when my kids were here, I represent the community of people that don't have children in the school right now. However, our two children came here. And they had an excellent education. One of the things was, for example, that one of our daughters liked music. She was able to learn the oboe. Another child, which is something difficult, right? You know that. The other thing was that doesn't exist right now, and I don't know when it went, maybe it went with the teacher, but there was theater. Our other child was a quiet kid, brainy, you know, everybody knew that she was a very intelligent kid, but nobody knew that she could sing or that she could act. And then in 6th grade, she had the opportunity to do that when they did How to Eat Like a Child. And she belted out the whole song and acted out, and it was a surprise for everybody. This is an opportunity for other children to demonstrate that they can do other things. Now, at that time, there was also Spanish, which I understand that was cut because of the system, you know, the feeding into the regional 7, that this was the only school that had it. But that's not a reason for cutting it. Actually, this is the opportunity to get everybody into teaching languages. Do you know, we are isolated, we are a small school in the middle of the Northwest Connecticut. Not many people have heard of it because many people have said, where? New Hartford is where? So this is the opportunity for our children to be knowledgeable of the world, to know or be aware that there are other people, other languages, other worlds to get to know. Would you believe the first time that I came here, a child, a 5-year-old, heard me talking and said, "Excuse me, but do you speak English?" Because he had never heard a person with an accent. You know, the idea is that we have to expand our horizons, teach our children to see other worlds. That way, their brains expand. We become better people. We become more loving, more tolerant, and we also would want to go and see other things, experience other things, just because we know about them. So please, my only plea is for you to consider the programming. Maybe you can add other things that are important. Theater is important. Music, you already have it. I don't know how many instruments you have these days. Vocal, you know, like choral groups. And then languages, please. And I am not saying only Spanish, you know, whatever language, Chinese, Japanese, sign language, anything, but other, so that because there are other people in this world that speak differently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Lloyd, 29 Pioneer Drive. Just some comments about the structural civil question, which has been brought up several times, that's been alluded. Just to be very clear, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I've been doing it for 38 years. I've done a lot of buildings. I've done a lot of facility studies. How you guys do yours is fine. I'm not here to tell you how to do it, but I am here to say that your architect has very clearly stated they are not providing those services. I've raised that question. We're going to eventually, as members of the public, be asked to vote on dollars. You, as a Board of Education, are going to be making decisions and selections on those dollars. Several of you have already commented about that. I just ask you to think about what exactly those dollars are. Every building needs a place to be put up. This building that you're in here is served by a well and a septic field. How do you know it's going to be able to handle any of the changes that you're talking about? I hear references about ledge. You know, most of the buildings in Connecticut are built on ledge. It's not a big deal, usually. But if you don't have a civil engineer and a structural engineer to take a quick look at it, you won't know. The architectural report points out structural problems, potential structural problems, such as cracked foundations on certain sites. But you can't address it because you don't have any input on it. You can say that you're going to throw a square footage at it, provided by the state of Connecticut. That's not unreasonable. However, we're not a city, we're a town. We're not building our houses where you can make short changes. Impacts to the construction of any type are not going to be measured in a few $1,000s. It's going to be measured in potentially millions of dollars. You make a decision to close a school or build a school or expand a school, you need the complete information. It's not going to take a lot of effort from a structural engineer to look at the general conditions of the Connecticut soil topography and look at the existing building and say, yeah, it's feasible, or no, you should consider this and add these kind of dollars for it. If you're building in a floodplain, that requires a completely different foundation design than building up here on top of the hill. The environmental issues are key. Floodplains are a problem. They can be fixed. Kristen is absolutely right on that. But to consider not using those services and proceeding on a plan of many options and not and asking people to go through the decision-making process of going from 2 to 3 to 1, and let's just say we all go to 1. Everybody says we're going to go to 1. How do you actually know you can actually build it there? The architect has said those services are not included in their budget. They've given you rough numbers. If they're wrong, we're off by a lot. It doesn't take months to do a quick walkthrough of a site to look at existing conditions and provide a professional opinion and a probable cost of what changes need to be made. The architect cannot tell you right now, because they don't have a structural engineer, about any additions that they attach to a building. New Hartford Elementary is a very old school. Every building I've ever worked on from that age group has required major modifications to the exterior walls to support any addition. What those are, who knows? But if you don't have it included as a general topic, because these are opinions of probable cost, not cost estimates. These are orders of magnitude that allow us, that allow you to select what option makes the most sense. How much are we willing to spend? But you're proceeding down a road now without enough information. And I strongly recommend that you take a moment in time and simply get the opinions of the 2 disciplines that are not represented in this report in any way as the feasibility of expansion and modifications to these sites. And that includes things like, do we have enough water? If you expand up here, is the well field going to support it? Will the septic field support it? Last picture I saw, the architect had gone so far as to use GIS and show these septic fields here and at New Hartford. That's important information, but you don't know the capacity. You don't need to do borings. You don't need to do perk pits, but you do need somebody to look at the existing condition and say, these are the things you need to be aware of. These are the things that you should budget for. And the architect is on record as saying that is not their expertise. So I strongly recommend that you get the expertise.
Thank you. Any additional public comment tonight? Okay, thank you. We'll close public comment. Next on the agenda is executive session. Can I get a motion to enter executive session at 9:10 and invite Superintendent Sousa to join us?
So moved.
I have a motion by Tim, second by Penny.
Got a lot to pick from.
Any objections?
Sorry.
That is unanimous.